So I really have to apologize. I did rehearse them earlier in this dance because I love it so much. And no wonder they were looking at me when I said like their eyes got a bit bigger and they was like, oh, not again. So now we're going, I don't know what I'm doing here actually, I'll just facilitate. But now we're going to have another question and answer with Ian and Kenny. You two have your things done.
Yeah, we
Yep,
have
I think we're mic'd.
We have our first question.
Wow.
Kenny,
Yes.
can you say a little bit about the way the score and the choreography were created? We all hear about Petipa giving instructions to his composers. You know, we must have this particular phrase here. Now, how did you work with yours? Was it the same, or?
It's a great question. Some things you're trying to pace a ballet. Effectively, you're starting to pace a ballet a year out from the stage. Could be even longer. So, in some of it, it's you talk about the scenario, what you want from the story, and then you have that conversation with your composer. And at first, you want to engage his imagination. You don't want to put too much filter on it. But also, then it comes back and it goes through a process where you strip it back between the two of you. You think this can work. It's also, in some ways, you need a repetition in it because you might have to cut the music. And that's a big job once it goes to orchestration, because remember, you're trying to get your pacing right now. We're going to get to the shoot and find, actually, I need another minute here, or I need something chopped there. And that can be really difficult. Like, it's like having your words cut as a writer. It can be a really difficult thing. And I think it's just being honest in the beginning and that this is the way it's going to happen. Also, what's interesting about Kerry is that he writes for film. So usually he sees the product and then writes for it. So to work the other way was really bizarre, but also, in his words, very freeing. So we just worked really closely with every scene and every detail and what we needed to achieve within that scene, as well as try to evoke Venice, try to evoke Paris, and be really, really clear with themes for characters. And it just went back and forth like that. There was times that I would say, I feel like I need something different. And there was times like the Masquerade, this music you just heard, where Kerry says, trust me, in the flow of the evening and the narrative arc, this is exactly what you need. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. But you have that trust, and that's what collaboration is. So that's how it worked.
Next. Oh. Somebody, I know we're forcing you to study tonight.
You were mentioning that there are lots of different things that are involved in the preparation of the ballet. What of these has given you the most sleepless nights?
I think it's the set. I think it's the set because it's like the wigs in some terms is you don't get to see it until the last minute. You have prop version. Most of it actually we have around and we get to practice it. And I always like the set to be really fluid. I want whatever can go onto the stage movable. When that means that they're 7 meters tall and as wide as those trucks you see back there, that becomes a little difficult. So my sleepless night lies over how easily they're going to move, I would say, yeah. And then it's different things. Sometimes you get to a problem that you hit a roadblock and you don't know how to solve it. And in fact, you try to use all the skills you've garnered so far, and it's just not happening. And that's the moment that the panic sets in. You're in the front of the room and you feel everything just closing down. 45 sets of eyes just like, he's got nothing. And it's in that moment you're like, ah! Like I said to David, just one foot in front of the other.
I think we had one down here.
Yeah. Oh, it's like a chat show.
Hi there. I was just wondering, at what stage does the composer actually get to see the dance that goes with his music?
I send him bits, and he also sends back like, oh, I hear this there. But we were so clearly already talking about the story, and when I was describing to him to get the flavor of the music and the atmosphere, I was already describing what I would want in the dance and what I saw happening as it was going. He gets little excerpts, but he says, please don't send me any more. I don't want it to be ruined. I want to see it in its whole entirety. And he comes sort of 2 weeks before the premiere, so soon, yeah.
Although you should know, I mean, you know, Kerry is watching now, so we should say hi.
Shout out,
Kerry! To Kerry in Los Angeles, live streaming. So he's seen this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he'll be awake. You're right. Yeah.
Carrie, I have to tell you, I love the moment when the note for the masquerade comes in and the musicians. I wait for it every time. Now all the dancers look at me at that moment.
Kenny,
Yes.
how different is the dance as you imagine in the beginning and how you see it now? Is it too much different, or
That's such a brilliant question. And something I learned really early on is there has to be room to breathe and for adaptability in the room, because what it's doing up here never truly transfers out there. And if you get stuck with a picture here and thinking, oh, it's not looking like that picture, you can be with that problem for so long. I think that part of the great thing about choreographing and live art is that you live in the moment. And it's always changing as long as you're alive. I look at it today one way. In a few years, I'm going to look at it completely different, because I'm in a completely different process in myself. So it's also good to go back. You're always self-editing, but you also have to be careful not to edit too quickly and to allow it time to sit, because what you think might not have worked then ends up working. So it's like a variation. Sometimes this is exactly as you imagine, and other times it goes so far from it. But I think sometimes the most exciting thing for us is that that's the beautiful thing. Hey, with narrative ballet, there is a structure. You can't go too far outside. You know, you're trying to tell a story at the end of the day. But that's not to say there won't be some beautiful surprises along the way, and you can say, hey, Ian, let's rewrite that bit.
Well, I mean, it's the first time I've been in a ballet rehearsal room, but also seeing something created in front of you. I've been involved in new plays that I haven't written, and I've been involved in my own new work. And what's really impressive is to see not the usual lockdown you have with a script and a writer, but actually a pooling of the extraordinary creative energy that this room has and this man allows. So Gavin, who you met earlier, is in the process of creating Claremont Casanova's manservant, who wasn't a character in the original scenario, and is a minor part of the biography and the memoir, but in Gavin's hands will not be a minor character in this ballet. So there is much brought along the way.
Yeah.
We have a question from Twitter for Ian, and that is, what was it that first got you interested in Casanova?
What was it first got me interested in Casanova? I toil in the 18th century. That is my nerdy life a lot of the time in the British Library, and of course you can't escape the works of Giacomo Casanova, and he's a really important source for sort of social history. So it's that. But actually, really, what it was was his food writing. Bizarrely, not many people, know this, but actually Casanova writes more about food than he does about that for which he is more famous, and therefore he's really interesting on what people are eating where. And I have a particular interest in food history, so it was that. So I initially brought to my publishers the idea that I would do, Casanova, food writer. And strangely, they weren't utterly sold on that idea. And it became more or less Casanova and the invention of sex, or of that idea, as I was saying earlier, of a lot of our modern understanding in the West of sex being born of that period, and his writings being quite important in that. But the book is structured actually as a 5-act opera, pretentiously, with sort of intermezzi, bits of social history, food and Casanova, and sex and Casanova, and travel and Casanova, that sort of thing. It was always about theatre. It was always actually about performance as well. I'm an actor as well as a playwright and historian, and of course that's also, I suppose, an understanding that I bring to him, is that actually that is one key to understanding him, is him as a child of the theatre. Thank you, Twitter.
We've actually had a bit of a duel-off between David and Ian for the role of Bragadin, and they're both excellent. I'm really struggling to pick at the moment.
There we go, yeah, yes.
It's like, no way. Sorry, there was a question up there, yeah.
Yes, I'm in awe of these people and indeed their bodies. No, I mean I'm in awe of their dedication to what they do. I wish. I think I think I'm probably a bit past it for that. But there we go. Never too old, maybe. No, there was when I first came actually here, and Northern Ballet have been so welcoming. It's such a glorious institution to be part of for a little while. But Hannah Bateman was running when I was first here a sort of a retreat for anybody who wanted to learn ballet. So I'm signing up. Because that is something, yes, absolutely, I'd love to do. Everything else I've written or adapted, film and theatre and whatever, I have snuck in some Hitchcock sort of way. So this is the first time I am exclusively, no matter what he tells you, in the audience.
I don't know. Yeah, fab.
Any more? One more?
I have another Twitter question.
Well, great, because our audience doesn't have any more by the looks of it.
The question is, did you have particular dancers in mind for the roles when planning the show?
Oh, that's a tough one.
That is a tough one, because getting casting out of him was a challenge.
It's like, it's so important, isn't it, how you see the show? Like, somebody is going to deliver that for you. So, of course, you have, yes, I did, is the short answer. And I was always clear that I was going to, that I wanted to create this role for Giuliano. He has so many qualities that I think are Casanova. And he has some of the experience to also, but it's more than that. It's his physical intellect as a dancer that really interests me, and his adaptability through many different styles and a lot of different vocabulary. Like Casanova played many roles, you see the church material as opposed to the musician material is a vast difference, and the dancers of Northern Ballet have to do it all. They are exceptionally great classical ballet dancers that are then doing really, really great contemporary movement there, and they're executing it at such a high level. So Giuliano is really a dancer that is so very versatile, much like Casanova, and so for me, I really saw it in that. But then you have a host of other great dancers like Javier and Joe, and you start to see Casanova in them in different ways. So it becomes really difficult. I hold on to the casting for so long because you're and ahhing like, oh my God, this dancer has this, they have that part of him. That is absolutely right. So in the end, luckily we have 3 casts, and you should try to see them all because they all bring something different. They really do, right?
I find that particularly interesting because these particular 3 dancers couldn't really be more different than one another. And I think that reflects very much back on Casanova, because I think everybody has their own particular idea of what Casanova is or could be. And I find it interesting watching the rehearsals and just seeing the different play. And then what's more interesting is actually in the first cast, for instance, Javier is Bragadin. So he's seducing the character he's going to be playing in another night. And Kenny, of course, did some very clever choreography with the 2 of them, which has to do with about the, what do you call this thing? I can never remember
The Kabbalah.
Cabal.
Yep.
I always wanted to call it kebab for some reason. And I was just looking, when they made it, I was just looking at Javier's face, and I pointed at him and I laughed, and I said, and you have to reverse all of that in the other character. And he just looked at me. So
Yeah.
it's really what I love about the company in that way, and something that I've always tried to do is make casts different, even though the choreography is the same and the language and what they have to say for the choreographer is true. They do it with their own color, their own dynamic. And I learned that very young, because sometimes I used to watch companies and it didn't matter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th casts all looked the same. And you couldn't actually get anything different from going to see a different show because they were very, very similar. And all good, but just the same. And I find when you have different aesthetics and different skills and different things that are weak and strong, it always produces very different performances. And you have different ages. So you put older dancers, medium, and younger all in the same part, and it's going to manifest itself in a very different way. So
Yeah. And so that was for all the characters. Each one was really thought about, and they presented themselves really clearly to me. But like David says, there's other qualities that bring other things, and it makes that exciting as well. So I feel like there is really 3 great casts to see.
So I guess
One more,
that
there's one
is there
more.
one more,
Yeah.
one last question sneaking in.
Here at the front, there was.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. Ooh, good question, because now he's going to have to think of casting sooner rather than later.
I like to think of it as a lucky dip.
A lucky dip. Yes, you won't get the letter that says my 3 lucky dips were the same dip.
Yeah.
Yes. It does get posted once it's up. It does get posted on the internet. So.
It's just injury can sometimes be difficult.
Yes,
It's a small. It's not. It's a reasonable sized company, but for the amount of shows it does, there is obviously a lot of injuries picked up and a lot of it changes. So they do try their best to get it out there as early as possible. And I promise you, it's pretty much as they know, it comes straight out.
So I guess that draws this evening to a close. I don't hope that you enjoyed it, because I think actually there shouldn't be a question there with what you got to see tonight. I want to thank Ian, because he's so eloquent. I'm glad I spoke before him.
I know, I felt.
And Kenny and the dancers. You really only saw a slither of this ballet. I mean, it's just. When I first described it, I kept saying it's going to be a feast for the eyes, and it truly is a feast, and not like a little, 2-course special with a prosecco. This is kind of like a kaiseki, if you know what that is in Japan, which is course after course after course of exceptional delicacies. And what's brilliant to watch is that each scene has its own look, its own style, and yet always linking through is his language. So I'm jealous. I'd like to say one thing, 2 things actually. Please join us outside for a drink. And now to do a little bit of the business side, we do have a costume appeal going, which to date has, I believe, raised £4,000. As I mentioned, this budget sort of became a bit of a feast as well. And the wigs are costing us pretty much as much as the costumes, to tell you the honest truth. And we need any help is welcome, and you all always help us. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.